You don't see 98% very often in anything in finance, and this is something people need to pay attention to. And then I'll just wrap it up by simply saying, look, when you put all this together, I see debt growing at a accelerating pace, and I see foreigners dumping our treasuries. They don't want them anymore. And I think treasuries will very soon no longer be the go-to store of value.
Get ready for a fascinating conversation with Andy Schectman. Today, he unveils a rare 98% certainty in the financial world, a phenomenon that deserves your full attention. We'll explore the acceleration of debt, the dwindling appeal of U.S. treasuries, and the rising prominence of precious metals as the new store of value. Brace yourself for a journey that's been hidden in plain sight, with insights that will leave you questioning the financial status quo.
I think one of the fallacies that needs to be discussed, and I'm glad you brought it up, is the liquidity of, or the perception of liquidity. You know, we were blessed with the privilege of doing 2 orders last year, both of them north of $50 million. And the first one we did, if you recall, the client wanted us to tell the world about it, which was something that's atypical in this industry that is dominated by privacy and by, that's something you never disclose. Yet the reason she wanted us to talk about it was because it took her over 4 days to get her money released from a bank and had to employ threatening and bringing in the regulators to have that money released. Now, that's not your typical situation, but certainly when you're rolling over an IRA, as an example, could take a week or 2 weeks or longer. And there's no rule about this, but I guess I could say, speaking in general terms, the custodians are very methodical, let's say, in releasing those funds. Can be a lot longer than people would like. And certainly when you talk about selling equities, I think it used to be T+3, and if I'm not mistaken, it's T+2 now, I think. T being the trade day plus 2 days. So you're looking at 3 days before the funds are in your account, certainly. So yeah, one of the things to think about is that, this is the whole reason about being prepared early before it becomes too late. And some of the things that you mentioned, people are waking up to things like bail-ins, or waking up to the fragility of the market or the system. And while that's great, I would argue that they have woken up perhaps a good 15, 20 minutes before their peers, the masses. And when their alarm clock goes off, you're too late. There's not enough metal out there. It would just become too clogged and cloudy, and it would end up ruining everything you're trying to do. So yeah, absolutely. When people ask me, let me just say it this way, and it's really a good point. It's worth talking about. When people say to me, I have $100,000, would I be better off buying it all at once or cost averaging? My typical go-to was cost averaging smooths out the uncertainty, and it is a good way to employ it. And over the years, it would have been a good strategy in this very much up and down volatile market. Really, over the years, we've seen all sorts of markets, low, high, and everything in between. But I guess you have to ask yourself, how close are we to that moment where there is an event like a bank bail-in or something else that would trigger a mass awakening? So yeah, I think now more than ever, it's really imperative, if you've made that decision, to be swift about it. And I'm not trying to say that to hurry people into the turnstile. I'm just simply saying, and again, I'm the little boy who cried wolf. I'm on the new version of the little boy who cried wolf. I'm there waving. I am the one who believes this. I am the one who believes we're living on borrowed time. At least get your core position in order now, before you have the luxury of cost averaging and taking your time and doing things. Until then, I think you're really putting yourself potentially in a compromising position, because one of these days, and I don't know when, but one of these days, the commercial banks and the COMEX will be long and will just run with the price, and they won't short the rising price and screw the managed money like they've done over and over and over and over again for many years. One of these days, the price will just go. And that will coincide with probably mass adoption by the public, realizing that there's nowhere left to hide. that's why it's so important to realize that as we get closer to these events, you're going to find it harder and harder and harder to find liquidity, even in things like money markets, as we've talked about before. Everyone talks about bail-ins, but don't forget money market gating was implemented at the same time. And I think when you look at what's happened over the last couple of years in the breakdown of the bond market, representing maybe the worst bond market in history over the last 2.5 years, down about 50%, I think we are beginning to see the world, at least the big money, discovered gold as being the preferred safe haven store of value. And I think there's no coincidence in this that we've seen the worst year ever for treasuries coinciding with the highest central bank purchases ever. In fact, last year we talked about how the central banks bought more gold than ever. And this year, so far this year, they've bought over 800 tons. That's up 14% year over year from last year. Their trend is accelerating. A couple more things to chat about, and that would be Schectman Capital is a company that published something, but I've talked about this ad nauseum, and that is they just came out and said, hey, we just crossed 130% debt to GDP, and they say 98% of the countries, I would say 100% of the countries where sovereign debt hits 130% debt to GDP, they've all defaulted on their debt. It's between 98 and 100%. You cross 130, whether it be through outright inflation or outright default, it's a bad thing that we have crossed this bridge, and they continue to accelerate the deficits, and the spending is out of control. Not a good thing. And I think the rest of the world sees this. You don't see 98% very often in anything in finance, and this is something people need to pay attention to. And then I'll just wrap it up by simply saying, look, when you put all this together, I see debt growing at a accelerating pace, and I see foreigners dumping our treasuries. They don't want them anymore. And I think treasuries will very soon no longer be the go-to store of value. I think it's moving to precious metals. And I think you're seeing this from the top on down, from the big central banks, and there will be a realization by the public that this is something that has already been in place now for a few years, using the suppression of the market to run cover for it. We've talked ad nauseum about the central bank purchases, which are accelerating. So don't get on the wrong side of that. Only one thing to mention that I've seen in terms of BRICS this week, and that is that there was a grand opening ceremony for the Yuan Clearing Bank in Pakistan, which here again, they're going all around the world and using mutual cooperation and inclusion to build infrastructure. And you're seeing it everywhere you turn, whether it's in the Middle East, whether it's in South America or in Africa. And this is a trend that is also accelerating, as is the settling in local currencies until they come to a mutual conclusion for a settlement currency in the BRICS nations. So not a lot of good news to report. And I think it just adds credence to why people should think about being a contrarian, de-dollarizing, and looking at gold and silver as wealth, not as an investment. In this environment where, I want to go on record, I mean, it makes no sense to me, none, when Ted Butler is saying that there's no product, that on the industrial level, that silver is 1,700% hypothecated, and gold even more than that in terms of the paper contracts versus the bars backing it. The same environment, mind you, that the Hunt brothers noticed in 1980, and yet it hasn't shown itself. In fact, it's the antithesis of that in this industry. It's eerily quiet, the calm before the storm. Not to say business isn't very strong, it is. But the fact that product availability and premium, I keep saying over and over and over again, in the face of Ted Butler saying it's all disappearing up there, and the draining of all of the exchanges up there hasn't trickled down yet down here. Whatever that event is, a bail-in or something worse, God forbid, maybe then people will see what I'm talking about as things change rapidly. But in this environment, I'm going to try to bring as much as I can while we can at real values. And we're going to try to do each week until we can't. One platinum, one gold, one silver. Maybe one of my very favorite gold items for sure. I'll save that for last. But we have the 1 ounce platinum Australian kangaroo right now at $85 over platinum spot. Platinum's been hard to come by over the last several years. The mints don't make very much. And from a standpoint of price relative to gold, it has a very similar argument as does silver. It just doesn't quite have the industrial footprint that silver does.
As we conclude this thought-provoking conversation with Andy Schectman, we encourage you to reflect on the profound insights we've uncovered. The 98% certainty he's revealed is a compelling glimpse into the dynamic world of finance. It's a reminder that the financial landscape is in a constant state of flux. Remember, knowledge is your most valuable asset. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and continue to seek out opportunities in this ever-evolving space. Thank you for being part of this engaging discussion. And until our next encounter, keep your eyes open for the unexpected twists that the future holds. And do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thank you again.